Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Where Should I Invest? My name is Rohan Batra, and I'm a financial wellbeing specialist at Hargreaves Lansdown. In this webinar, we will be discussing having an investment strategy, where you can invest, the help available to you, and what to look for when choosing your own investment. Please note, the information contained in this webinar should in no way be construed of as personal financial advice. So just to begin with, why should you have a strategy? Well, a strategy should help you meet your investment objectives. It should help you work towards those objectives without taking unnecessary risks. And it should also increase the likelihood of choosing the investments that are right for you. So trying to fit them into your strategy and staying within those parameters. Now, to help those of you who are new to investing, I just wanted to give you some of our views and some key points to consider. Now, these rules, or rules of thumb, I should say, are helpful for many people, but this is not exactly how you may choose to invest. There are many ways and many approaches that you can use. And as I say, this is just one way in which to look at this. No matter what you choose, though, we believe it is important to have a diverse portfolio so that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And to that end, we would suggest, if you are new to investing, having a core fund, which would be a well diversified fund, typically with different assets within it. So, not necessarily just shares, but potentially bonds and maybe property and so forth as well. If you have a group SIP with us, then your default fund may well form your core fund. But that's not necessarily that might necessarily be the right core fund for you, and you may instead choose to change that. So, in addition to the core fund, you might start by investing about 20% of your money using the tools that we are discussing today. And some of you may have already come across some of these tools, but hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll all be a bit more familiar with some of the help and assistance that we can afford you. Now, just to be clear, you might not choose to have all 80% in one core fund. You might choose to make up the core element of your portfolio using a few different funds. You may choose to just put together your own well-diversified portfolio from scratch, and that's completely fine. But the key point here is to ensure that you have a sufficient level of diversification, whilst also ensuring that it keeps in line with your investment strategy. And as your confidence builds, you then may choose to take on more and more responsibility and increase the amount of your portfolio that you're investing and managing yourself. So, a core fund, what is a fund, and how might it work, and how might it assist you in your investments? Well, a fund is when your money as an investor is pooled together with that of other investors, is handed over to a fund manager who does the day-to-day running of that money, and that fund manager will choose which shares, which property, which bonds and so forth to put your money into. So it's really important here that your objectives and that of your fund managers, broadly speaking, align with each other. And this is why you may not choose to have just one fund and may have a few, is because you might find that one fund alone doesn't fit your objectives, but a few working in concert may well hit your objectives and fit within your strategy rather well. So in terms of some of the tools that we have available, so the Master Portfolios tool will help you put together your own portfolio, and we'll be going through this on the next slide. Our wealth shortlist is a list of funds that we believe have the potential to outperform over the long term. But there are a whole range of investments available. There's access to in excess of 3,000 funds, as well as individual shares, bonds, investments, trusts, and exchange traded products from the UK, North American, and select European markets. Now, the Master Portfolios tool. So the first thing to do here is just choose your portfolio style. So there's 5 styles that you can use with the Master Portfolios. And for the purpose of this example, I've chosen medium risk. You then put in how much you're putting in. I've put in £500 a month. Press calculate, and it'll put together the specimen portfolio for you. Now, just to be clear, This output is not advice, it's not personal to you, and you can really adapt it to make it a bit more bespoke. Again, you can also see that it's not got that same 80% 20 split that I mentioned earlier on, but holistically it is a very well diversified portfolio. So the top 4 funds are all in shares, all in equities, and then those bottom 4 include bond funds and total return funds. Now, shares are, generally speaking, higher risk assets, but they do also give the potential of good performance, and over the long term, historically, shares have outperformed other asset classes, but they are more volatile. So that does mean that there is a chance of loss, especially over the short term. Bond funds and total return funds should be a little less volatile. There still is a risk of loss, but as I say, their values don't go up and down quite as aggressively as that of those funds invested into shares. So they add a little bit of, shall I say, ballast to the portfolio as a whole. Now, as a whole, it's medium risk, but it's made up of riskier funds and lower risk funds, and that's why it's quite diversified. And there will be times when those more aggressive funds do really well, and those lower risk funds will be a bit of a drag on the performance. And there will be times when the higher risk funds drop in value and those lower risk funds hopefully add some ballast to the portfolio as a whole. You can play with these sliders though, so that you can really tailor it to individual needs. So you could remove sort of 10% from one fund, add it to another. You can also click through into each of these funds to read more about the objectives and learn more about how that might fit in with your overall strategy. Now, funds found within the master portfolios are drawn from our wealth shortlist, so you can also refer back to that for other alternative investment options. Now, on the wealth shortlist, as well as in the master portfolios, we have, of course, had to choose those funds to put on those lists and in those tools. So there is a lot of work that we do to choose these funds, and you may choose to use some of the techniques that we use when choosing when choosing your own investments. So it is really important to acknowledge that past performance is not a guide to future returns. None of us have a crystal ball, so none of us know what's going to happen in the future. But we do like to look at the performance of a fund, and more importantly, looking at a long track record and how a fund and fund manager has achieved their returns. Because we want to ensure that they're not getting those returns from luck. We want it to be skill. Now, we can look at where they're investing, so whether it's a cyclical or a defensive sector. Cyclical investments tend to do well in good market conditions, but rather poorly in poor market conditions, whereas defensive sectors tend to do well irrespective of market conditions. So defensive sectors are sectors that we tend to buy from and use irrespective of how much money we've got in the bank, and these are generally your essential items, whether that's groceries or toothpaste manufacturers, those sorts of products that we can't really get away from. We look at how the fund has performed versus benchmarks, so average funds in its sector, and then we can also see how it's performed against other funds that we may be interested in. And we also look qualitatively at how a fund looks to achieve its returns, and we write about this for you in our research notes. So where do you find much of this information? Well, you'll find it on the fund fact sheet. Now, here is the top half of a fund fact sheet. Don't worry about the name of the fund. It's kind of immaterial. It's just there for illustrative purposes. But there's a lot of information just on that top half of the screen. So I'm going to run you through that and where you might find a bit further information. So in addition to the fund name, it says Class I accumulation. So Class I denotes the charging structure. I'll come back to that in a second. And accumulation means that if the underlying assets, so the shares, bonds, and so forth within the fund produce an income, that income will be retained within the fund and automatically reinvested. The alternative option is income units, where the income will be paid out to your HL account and then be treated however you would like it to be treated, whether that's reinvested or held on account. You've then got the sell or the buy price, and you can see that it's gone down by 1 penny since the previous price was published. Funds price typically once a day, often at midday. This is a relatively old screenshot, but as you can see by the date when the prices are from. Now, beneath that, you've got a number of tabs. In the at a glance page, you've got further details on the fund charges. So I've said this is a class I. So class I will have a specific charge, and beneath where it confirms the charges, it will say if any other classes are available and whether they're cheaper or more expensive. The at a glance page also will confirm details such as the fund's objectives and some key information about the fund. The charts and performance tab will show you how the fund has performed over the past 5 years typically, and will enable you to overlay other investment options so that you can compare it against the benchmark and any other funds that you're considering. On the research tab, we'll provide research on how we believe the fund has performed, why it's performed, how it's performed, and how it may fit into your portfolio. The fund analysis tab has details on the fund, so some of the raw data of where it's invested, how much in shares, how much in bonds, which countries you're in, or this fund is in, which sectors, and so forth. The Key Features and Documents tab has a number of regulatory documents, including the fund fact sheet and the Key Investor Information document. The Key Investor Information document specifies some of the risks associated by investing into a fund, and it is a document that you will be confirming that you have read whenever you invest into a fund. So I would urge you to read that before you place any investments. The Costs tab has further regulatory information about the impact of costs on your investments, and the Invest Now button would enable you to place an investment instruction. You can certainly explore the website, and I would very much encourage you to do so that you can read up more on any investment that you may be considering. You can, in addition to investing into funds, choose to invest directly into individual shares, bonds, and so forth. So we provide research and commentary on a number of investments, including shares in some investment trusts. These are generally the larger companies and investment trusts that you'll find. We have really competitive charges. And you have access, as I say, to the UK, North American, and select European markets. If you have questions, then our investment help desk is there to help, but you can also refer to our guides and some of the news articles and ideas available on our website. Thank you for listening in. There are 3 things that I hope that you will be considering as you walk away from this presentation. The first is considering what you're saving towards and investing towards. How much risk do you want to take? And how much help do you want? Are you quite happy managing your own investments? Do you want to use the guides and the tools available that we've discussed, or do you want advice? And we're happy to provide you with as much support as you need. Everything that we've discussed today is applicable within any of our investment accounts. So that includes the SIPP, Stocks and Shares ISA, Lifetime ISA, Fund and Share account, which of course are all available within the One HL portal with that one point of contact and that wide range of investment options that we have discussed. Should you have further questions, do of course feel free to contact us. You can find further information about choosing your own investments and how to choose your own investments in the Learn section of our website. The app will help you manage and monitor your investments, and then you've got our contact details on your screen now. Before you go, if you don't mind just reading through these important investment notes, thank you for taking the time to listen into this webinar, and do let us know, of course, if there are any questions that we can help you with.